At the Moretti Empire's centennial gala, Don Alessio Moretti held a scorched map above his head and accused Clara Bennett, the voluptuous, 440-pound restoration expert he secretly loved, of erasing 3 waterfront districts worth $500 million. Security forced Clara to her knees before 12 crime families, while Alessio announced that she would be judged at midnight. Yet the missing territory had not been cut away or burned. Under the warmth of Clara's bare fingertips, silver boundary lines began surfacing beneath a layer of 19th-century ink. The land appeared to belong not to Alessio's enemies, but to a woman officially dead for 26 years. Clara whispered that someone had altered the map long before she entered the archive, but Alessio's own signet was pressed into the counterfeit seal, with 40 minutes remaining. The ballroom doors locked automatically, and every armed guest received the same message: kill the map restorer before she reveals who truly owns the Moretti Empire. The silver boundary appeared beneath Clara Bennett's fingertips at 11:23, and every armed man in the Moretti ballroom reached for his weapon. She stood at the center of a marble floor designed to resemble an antique compass. Surrounded by 12 crime families, 3 federal observers, and the board members of Moretti Maritime Holdings. Above her, Don Alessio Moretti held the scorched territorial map inside a gilded display frame. 3 waterfront districts had vanished from it. Together, they controlled 40% of New York's private freight berths and generated nearly $500 million each year. At midnight, the 12 families were scheduled to renew the century-old compact that recognized those districts as Moretti territory, without their boundaries visible on the authenticated map. Ownership would pass to the rival Belandi Consortium under the Compact's own terms. Alessio's expression revealed none of the panic such a loss should have caused that frightened Clara more than his anger. "You were the only person authorized to restore this document," he said. His voice carried easily through the silent ballroom. Clara lifted her chin. Her midnight blue gown followed the generous curves of her 440-pound figure, elegant and unapologetic beneath the chandeliers. Hours earlier, Alessio had quietly told her she looked magnificent. Now he regarded her as though every private moment between them had been another instrument she used against him. "I was authorized to repair the fire damage," she replied. "I did not remove those districts." Alessio turned the frame toward the assembled families. The lower edge had been cleaned, reinforced, and retouched with pigments mixed in Clara's laboratory. Her initials appeared beside the conservation seal. So did a line from her final report: "No concealed markings detected." Vittorio Carbone, Alessio's silver-haired consigliere and godfather, stepped forward. "The independent scan was completed this morning. The erased areas contain traces of the same solvent found in Miss Bennett's private workroom." A screen behind him displayed security footage. Clara watched herself enter the archive at 2:13 that morning, disable the humidity alarm, and remain alone with the map for 17 minutes. Every image was genuine. The conclusion was not. "I disabled that alarm because someone raised the archive temperature," she said. "Heat was activating something beneath the restoration layer." "You reported a faulty sensor," Alessio answered, "because your internal conservation channel was compromised." A murmur moved through the ballroom. Carbone's face showed only measured concern. "By whom?" Clara looked toward the men stationed beside every door. She had seen one of them leaving the restricted archive corridor the previous night. But naming him now would expose the only person who might still possess an unaltered thermal record. "I cannot tell you here." Alessio's jaw tightened. "You are accused of stripping my family of its most valuable territory. Yet you expect me to accept a warning you refuse to explain. I expect you to delay the signing. Midnight is a contractual deadline. Then clear the ballroom and examine the map under controlled heat." Carbone gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Convenient. Remove every witness while she completes whatever she began." Clara ignored him. "Alessio, the visible borders are bait. Someone wants all 12 families focused on what disappeared." For the first time, uncertainty entered Alessio's eyes. It lasted less than a second. He removed the scorched map from its frame and lowered it toward her. "Prove it." 2 guards seized Clara's wrists before she could protest. Another stripped off her conservation gloves. Alessio pressed her bare right hand against the lower harbor district. Warmth traveled from her palm into the old linen. A hair-thin silver line surfaced beneath her fingers. Then another. Gasps replaced the silence as hidden boundaries spread across the map, like veins under translucent skin. They curved around the missing waterfront districts, crossed land the Moretti family had never publicly claimed, and ended beneath a faded handwritten name. Lucia Valenti. Alessio went motionless. Clara knew the name from a sealed death certificate she had discovered 4 nights ago. Lucia Valenti had died 26 years earlier, 3 months before Alessio was born. Carbone leaned closer. "What is that?" "Not an ownership transfer," Clara said. "A beneficiary layer. Whoever placed it there expected Alessio's body heat to reveal it during tonight's ceremony." "How could they predict that?" one of the rival bosses demanded. "Because the compact requires the reigning Don to touch the original map before signing." Alessio examined the black wax seal beside Lucia's name. His face hardened. It bore his personal signet, the one he had worn since his coronation 7 years ago. Cell phones vibrated throughout the ballroom. Dozens of screens illuminated at once. Guards, dignitaries, and rival bosses read the same anonymous message: "Kill the map restorer before she reveals who truly owns the Moretti Empire." The ballroom doors slammed shut. Steel security panels descended over the windows, and the overhead clock reset itself to 40 minutes. Alessio drew his pistol, but did not aim it at Clara. He aimed it at the room. "No one leaves," he ordered. "Anyone who approaches her dies." Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the ballroom, but Clara heard the danger before anyone moved. A faint metallic click sounded to her, left the unmistakable release of a Pistol S safety. She dropped. A shot cracked above her, shattering the gilded frame in Alessio's hand. Guests screamed and overturned tables as armed guards drew their weapons without knowing where to aim. In the confusion, someone caught Clara by the back of her gown and dragged her across the marble. She drove her elbow backward, struck a solid chest, and twisted free. "Clara," Alessio's voice. He seized her wrist and pulled her behind the raised platform beneath the Centennial banner. His body shielded hers as 2 more shots struck the marble compass. Clara felt, rather than saw him return fire. Each movement controlled despite the darkness. Emergency lights flickered on after 11 seconds. Red illumination flooded the ballroom. One of Carbone's security men lay wounded beside the western doors. A masked waiter was sprawled near the orchestra pit, his dropped pistol several feet away. Alessio's soldiers surrounded him before he could rise. Clara steadied herself against the platform. Alessio still held her wrist. His grip was firm but careful, positioned above the delicate bones instead of crushing them. He knew exactly how to touch her without causing pain. That knowledge made his earlier accusation hurt more. "You disobeyed your own order," she said. Alessio glanced at her. "Which order? You approached me. I make exceptions when someone is shooting at you." Before she could answer, Carbone crossed the ballroom with 4 guards. The gunman had a Belandi access badge. "Badges can be copied," Clara said. Carbone looked down at her as though she were an inconvenience he had tolerated for too long. "And maps can be altered." Alessio released her wrist. The loss of contact was immediate and colder than the air. "Secure the prisoner," he ordered. Clara looked toward the masked gunman. "Alive, if possible." "That was not who I meant." A shadow passed through Alessio's eyes, but he did not answer. 2 guards positioned themselves beside Clara. They did not restrain her again, though everyone understood she was not free. For 3 years, that contradiction had defined her place inside the Moretti Empire. She had first entered Moretti Maritime Holdings through its legitimate historical foundation. Hired to assess a water-damaged collection of harbor surveys, the previous conservator had estimated 18 months of work and recommended discarding nearly 1/3 of the archive. Clara completed the recovery in 11 months and saved every document except 2 blank inventory sheets. No one in the criminal council had cared how she accomplished it. They cared when her restored shipping charts exposed an accounting error that had cost the company $9 million annually. They cared when she identified a counterfeit customs seal by recognizing that its blue pigment had not existed until 1987. They cared when she reconstructed a burned warehouse plan and found an evacuation tunnel that saved Alessio during an ambush. After that, he began bringing documents to her personally. Never during office hours, he would arrive after midnight with his jacket open, his tie loosened, and the controlled exhaustion of a man who trusted no one enough to appear tired. Clara would work while he sat across from her, reading reports and pretending not to watch her hands. He noticed details others ignored: the plum lipstick she wore when presenting difficult findings, the silver pins holding back her dark curls, and the tailored dresses she chose because she had never considered her full, soft body something to hide. Once, after she had spent 14 hours recovering waterlogged correspondence, Alessio placed his coat around her shoulders. "You make ruined things tell the truth," he had said. She should have understood then that he valued the truth more easily than the woman uncovering it. Tonight proved it. Carbone retrieved the damaged map and laid it on the central table. The silver boundaries were fading as the linen cooled. Lucia Valenti's name had already disappeared. "We have 34 minutes, Carbone announced. "If Alessio does not touch the authenticated borders and sign the compact at midnight, the Bellandis can invoke forfeiture. Not if the map is under active evidentiary dispute," Clara said. One of the corporate attorneys shook his head. "The compact recognizes only a challenge submitted by a sitting family head. Then Alessio can challenge it. He would have to name the competing beneficiary," Carbone replied. "A dead woman cannot hold territory." Clara studied the map beneath the red emergency lights. Something about the revealed lines troubled her. They did not merely enclose the missing districts. Their curves followed the 19th century shoreline, before the harbor had been expanded with artificial land. Lucia Valenti was not being presented as a modern owner. She was being positioned as the source of the Moretti claim. "Bring me ultraviolet lamps, a humidity hood, and the microscope from my workroom," Clara said. Carbone smiled faintly. "Still giving orders. If you sign before we understand this layer, you may authenticate a fraudulent chain of ownership in front of 3 federal observers that silenced the attorneys." Alessio studied her for several seconds. "Give her what she needs." Carbone's expression tightened. "Her laboratory is part of the crime scene. Then send guards. The internal network is compromised. We cannot confirm which corridors remain secure." "I know another way," Clara said. "There is a service passage behind the Eastern Portrait Gallery. It leads directly to the conservation wing." Alessio's gaze sharpened. "How do you know about a passage absent from every security plan?" "Because 6 months ago, I restored the original architectural drawings and warned your facilities director that someone had recently opened it." "Who received that warning?" Clara looked at Carbone. "His office." Across the ballroom, the captured gunman suddenly convulsed. One guard shouted for a medic. Another reached beneath the man's collar and pulled out a broken capsule. Alessio turned toward the commotion. Carbone did not. He was watching Clara. At that moment, she understood why every warning she had submitted had disappeared and why the assassin had known exactly when the hidden ink would appear. Carbone touched 2 fingers to his cuff link. Somewhere inside the sealed ballroom, Clara's phone began ringing. The screen displayed a photograph of her younger sister bound to a chair, followed by a single instruction: confess before midnight or Emily dies. Clara silenced the phone before anyone else could locate the sound. The photograph remained on the screen. Emily sat beneath a bare industrial light with her wrists secured behind a metal chair. A strip of gray fabric covered her mouth. There was no visible blood, but terror had widened her eyes. Behind her, a section of painted brick bore a faded white number, 14. Clara memorized every detail before deleting the notification from the lock screen. Her sister had never been part of the Moretti world. Emily taught 2nd grade in Queens, adopted old dogs, and still called Clara whenever a spider appeared in her apartment. No one should have known she was Clara's emergency contact. No one except the Moretti personnel office and the man who controlled its security records. Carbone touched his cufflink again. Clara forced herself not to look at him. If she accused him without proof, he would deny everything and move Emily before Alessio could act. If she showed Alessio the photograph, Carbone's access to the ballroom surveillance system would tell him immediately. The threat required her to confess, but it did not specify when. That gave her minutes. Perhaps less the passage, Alessio said. Can it get us to your laboratory? Clara slipped the phone into the concealed pocket of her gown. Yes, you, me, and 4 guards. No, his expression hardened. That was not a request. 4 armed men cannot move silently through a service corridor barely wide enough for one person. If the person controlling your security system sees a large team disappear, the passage becomes a trap. You expect me to let you go alone. I expect you to decide whether you need the truth more than you need control. The words struck him cleanly. Alessio looked toward the clock. 32 minutes remained. He selected one guard, a lean, dark-haired woman named Sofia Russo, whose loyalty belonged to Alessio personally rather than to Carbone's security division. Russo goes with you. Clara nodded. Carbone stepped forward. Alessio, sending the accused into an unsecured archive is reckless, so is taking advice from the office that ignored her warning about the passage. For the first time, Carbone's composure cracked, only slightly, but Clara saw it. Alessio saw only his godfather's displeasure. Hold the ballroom, he ordered. No transmissions, no movement, and no one touches that map. Carbone bowed his head. Of course. Clara led Sofia through the Eastern Portrait Gallery. She pressed the lower corner of a carved wooden frame depicting Alessio's great-grandfather. Releasing a concealed panel, stale air moved through the opening. Sofia entered first with a flashlight and pistol. The passage descended between stone walls before narrowing behind the old archive. Clara moved carefully, gathering the skirt of her gown in one hand. Her size had never prevented her from working in cramped restoration spaces, though most people assumed otherwise. She understood how to distribute her weight, how to test weakened flooring, and how to recognize structural alterations by touch. Halfway down the corridor, her fingers found fresh plaster. Stop. Sofia froze. Clara examined the wall. The original mortar was coarse and lime-based, but a rectangular section had been patched with modern acrylic compound. A thin wire disappeared beneath its edge. Camera, Sofia whispered. Heat sensor, possibly sound as well. Someone had monitored the secret passage after Clara reported it. She opened the compact sewing kit hidden in her evening bag and removed a silver needle. Sofia raised an eyebrow. Loose beadwork, Clara explained. Expensive gowns are less reliable than old paper. She used the needle to lift the wire without breaking it, then slid a strip of insulating silk beneath the contact. The sensor red light remained steady. To whoever is watching, Clara said. We never passed this point, they continued. The conservation laboratory door stood open. Clara had locked it herself at 6 that evening. Inside, drawers had been emptied, solvents overturned, and examination records scattered across the floor. Nothing appeared stolen. The destruction had been designed to make an inventory impossible. Sofia photographed the room with an offline camera. What do we need? Not what they expect. Clara crossed to an antique oak cabinet containing rolls of damaged survey linen. She removed the lowest drawer, reached behind it, and retrieved a narrow archival box. 4 nights earlier, after discovering the first silver filament beneath the Mapes Harbor District, she had taken microscopic pigment samples. Standard protocol required her to place them in the evidence safe. Instead, she had hidden half the material because the archive temperature logs had changed between 2 consecutive printouts. Her distrust had just preserved the only uncontaminated samples. She placed a silver fragment beneath the microscope and switched on a low ultraviolet lamp. Blue-white light revealed 3 distinct materials: 19th-century shell silver, modern acrylic adhesive, and tiny particles of black sealing wax. The hidden boundary is old, Clara said, but someone recently lifted it, altered what lay underneath, and sealed it again. Can you identify when the adhesive cures in stages? This was applied within the last 6 weeks. Sofia checked the doorway. Your report says there were no hidden markings. My final report does. Clara opened the document history stored on the microscope's isolated workstation. The machine was not connected to the Moretti network because conservation imaging required stable, uncompressed files. Her original report appeared with a creation date from 12 days earlier. Subsurface metallic boundary detected. Authentication suspended pending investigation. Someone had replaced the submitted version after it left this workstation. Clara inserted a blank archival disk and began copying the original file, thermal scans, and microscope images. A soft mechanical sound came from inside the wall. Sophia drew her pistol. Clara looked toward the ventilation grill above the solvent cabinet. A faint current moved a loose strip of tissue paper. The laboratory ventilation system should have shut down automatically when the ballroom lockdown began. Instead, it was running at maximum intake. The sharp odor reached her a second later. Not smoke. Acetone. They re-flooding the room with solvent vapor, Clara said. Turn off anything that can spark. Sophia killed the ultraviolet lamp, but the computer and microscope were connected to sealed circuits. Clara snatched the copying disk from the drive and moved toward the passage. Her phone vibrated again. This time the message contained a live video. Emily's chair had been moved beside a large industrial window. Beyond the glass, Clara could see stacks of blue shipping containers and the illuminated crown of the Moretti Centennial Building in the distance. Warehouse 14, the missing waterfront district. Beneath the video, new words appeared. Leave the disk. Return to the ballroom. Confess in 10 minutes. A spark snapped inside the ventilation grill. Sophia grabbed Clara's arm. But Clara pulled free and ran to the emergency preservation cabinet. Inside were fire blankets and oxygen-resistant document bags. She sealed the disk in one bag, wrapped it inside a damp fire blanket, and pushed it through a narrow drainage opening beneath the sink. "What are you doing?" Sophia demanded, saving the evidence somewhere they want to find it. The first blue flame rolled across the ceiling. Clara and Sophia plunged into the passage as fire swept through the laboratory behind them. Heat struck Clara's back, and the pressure wave drove both women to their knees. The hidden sensor's light changed from red to green. Someone had overridden Clara's insulation remotely. A speaker concealed behind the fresh plaster crackled to life. Carbone's voice filled the corridor. "You always were more intelligent than Alessio allowed himself to see." Then the steel fire doors closed at both ends of the passage. Smoke entered the passage through the seams around the western fire door. Sophia struck the control panel with the grip of her pistol, but its screen remained black. "Carbone controls the system. If I can reconnect my radio, he will hear every word. He already knows we know. No, he knows. I suspect him. He doesn't know what evidence we preserved." The speaker crackled again. "You have 8 minutes, Clara." Carbone's voice was calm, almost paternal. "Return to the ballroom. Confess that you falsified the map for the Bellandis, and your sister walks away. Refuse and Warehouse 14 becomes her tomb." Sophia looked at Clara. "Your sister?" Clara showed her the photograph and the live image. Sophia studied the numbered wall, the container stacks, and the distant Moretti Tower. "I can send a team. The ballroom network is his. Any order you transmit will reach him first. I can tell Alessio in person if we get out." Clara dropped to her knees beside the older stonework. Heat pressed against her back as she examined the base of the eastern door. The passage had originally been built as an escape route during Prohibition. Its designers would never have relied on electricity alone. She ran her fingertips along the mortar until she found a shallow iron ring buried beneath decades of paint. Together, she and Sophia pulled. A section of flooring lifted, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft descending beneath the gallery wall. It was barely 3 feet wide. Sophia went first. Clara followed, turning sideways and lowering herself carefully rung by rung. The confined space pressed against her shoulders. Hips and full stomach, but panic would only waste strength. She controlled her breathing and concentrated on each foothold. Above them, the fire door buckled inward. They reached a drainage tunnel beneath the building with 6 minutes remaining. Clara knew the tunnel's eastern branch emptied near the street. The western branch led beneath the ballroom's preservation vault. More importantly, the archival drain from her laboratory joined it 50 feet ahead. She found the wet fire blanket lodged behind an iron grate. The sealed disc inside remained intact. "Take it," Clara told Sophia. "Don't give it to Alessio until you are beyond Carbone's surveillance. You are coming with me. I'm returning to the ballroom. If you confess, Alessio will condemn you. If Aunt Emily dies," Sophia caught her arm. "Carbone may kill her anyway." "I know." The admission nearly broke Clara's voice. but she steadied it. That is why you must leave through the eastern outlet. Find a secure line and send Alessio's private harbor team to Warehouse 14. They answer directly to him, no one else. What will you do? Give Carbone the confession he expects and make him believe the evidence burned. Sophia hesitated, then concealed the archival disc inside her jacket. How do I explain your absence, you don't? If Alessio knows you are helping me, his reaction may expose you. That means he will believe the accusation. Clara looked back toward the western tunnel. For a while, she hated how much those words hurt. They separated. Clara climbed through an access hatch beneath the preservation vault and entered the ballroom with soot across her face, a tear in her midnight blue gown, and blood running from one scraped palm. 24 minutes remained on the clock. Every guest turned toward her. Alessio crossed the floor immediately. Where is Sophia? Dead. The lie tasted like ash. His face went still. Carbone approached from beside the map, and the laboratory destroyed. Did you recover any evidence? Clara met his gaze. There was none. The clock above them changed to 23 minutes. Carbone touched his cufflink once. Clara's phone vibrated. The live image showed Emily breathing for now. Alessio stopped several feet away from Clara, as though proximity might interfere with his judgment. Tell me what happened. She could have told him Carbone's name. She could have shown him the threat. But the cameras positioned around the ballroom were still operating, and Carbone needed only seconds to signal the kidnappers. Emily would die before Alessio's men reached the warehouse. Clara turned toward the 12 families. I altered the restoration report. Shocked whispers filled the room. Alessio did not move. Clara forced herself to continue. I discovered the silver boundary 12 days ago. I removed 3 districts from the visible map and concealed the beneficiary layer beneath modern adhesive. Why? He asked. Carbone had not instructed her to supply a motive. That omission offered the only space in which she could leave Alessio a contradiction for money. Alessio knew her finances. He had once offered to triple her salary after she recovered the evacuation tunnel. She had refused because the Foundation's pay was already fair. More importantly, she had spent her own savings to keep Emily's school arts program open when the city withdrew funding. If he remembered he would know money was the wrong answer. Carbone placed a tablet on the table. We recovered a transfer made yesterday to an account in Miss Bennett's name, $20 million from a Belandi holding company. The banking record displayed Clara's address, social security number, and biometric authorization. Alessio looked at it for a long moment. She watched the first wound open behind his controlled expression, not anger. But the collapse of trust. A Belandi representative stepped forward. That company does not belong to us. Of course you would say that, Carbone replied. Alessio's gaze returned to Clara. Did you accept this payment? Yes, and Lucia Valenti. I added the name. Why hers? Clara's mind raced. Carbone wanted ownership of the districts, but Lucia mattered to something larger. The name had affected Alessio personally. If Clara invented an explanation, she might accidentally help Carbone erase its true significance. I chose it at random. This time Alessio reacted. His eyes narrowed. Good. He knew she never chose anything at random. Carbone moved behind her. She has confessed. Under the compact, sabotage of an original territorial instrument requires immediate judgment. Not until Sophia Russo is found, Alessio said. Carbone produced a phone. The ballroom screen changed to footage from the Eastern Portrait Gallery. Clara and Sophia appeared entering the secret passage together. 6 minutes later, another camera showed Clara emerging alone through the preservation vault. Then came an audio recording. Clara's voice filled the ballroom. Take it, don't give it to Alessio. The recording stopped before the words until you are beyond Carbone's surveillance. Carbone displayed a final image. Sophia lying motionless beside the eastern drainage outlet. Blood spreading beneath her head, the archival disc visible near her hand. Clara's breath stopped. That was not part of the plan, Sophia, she whispered. She was found 3 minutes ago. Carbone said, the disc contains a forged report prepared on Miss Bennett's private workstation. He inserted it into an offline reader. Clara's original findings appeared on the screen, but the file metadata now showed they had been created that evening after the accusation began. Carbone had prepared an altered disk in advance. He had known where Clara would hide the evidence. Or he had switched it after Sophia emerged. Alessio approached Clara slowly. "Did you attack her?" "No." It was the first truthful answer she had given him since returning. Carbone's cufflink flashed. Clara's phone displayed a new image. A man stood behind Emily, with one hand resting on the back of her chair. "Finish it." Clara closed her eyes. "Yes," she said, "I attacked Sophia." Whatever remained between her and Alessio broke without sound. He removed the Moretti protection ring from Clara's right hand, the ring he had given her after the warehouse ambush, and placed it on the table. "Clara Bennett," he said before the 12 families, "you are stripped of my protection and confined pending judgment at midnight." 2 guards closed in. Carbone lifted his cuff link toward his mouth. "Move the sister." Clara heard him because she was standing close enough. Alessio did not. The message on her phone changed one final time. Too late. Clara drove her scraped palm into the damaged map. The hidden silver lines flared beneath her blood and body heat, illuminating a narrow route from the ballroom to Warehouse 14. Then every fire alarm in the building began to scream. Clara seized the map, tore it from Carbone's hands, and ran through the only security door that opened. Behind her, Alessio issued an order she would remember long after the night ended. "Bring her back alive if she surrenders." Clara did not surrender. She reached the service elevator before Alessio's guards sealed the lower floors, abandoned her heels inside it, and escaped through a freight corridor leading toward the harbor. Security footage showed her crossing the rain-swept loading yard with the damaged map beneath one arm. At 11:51, she disappeared between 2 rows of shipping containers. At 11:56, gunfire erupted near Warehouse 14. At midnight, the Moretti Centennial Compact still required Alessio's signature. He signed it with Clara's blood dried across the map. The 12 families witnessed him authenticate the visible boundaries, while 3 federal observers recorded every word. Because the beneficiary layer remained disputed, Carbone persuaded the council to approve a temporary emergency clause. The 3 waterfront districts would stay under Moretti control for 72 hours, after which their ownership would be transferred to a neutral trust pending forensic review. Carbone had written the trust documents himself. By Twelveton, Clara had vanished. Her sister vanished with her. Sophia Russo's body was gone from the drainage outlet before Alessio's private physician arrived. Only blood, an empty cartridge case, and the corrupted archival disk remained. For the next 6 hours, the empire began failing in places Clara had once quietly held together. A customs seizure trapped 11 Moretti cargo vessels because the restored exemption certificates could not be found. 2 insurance syndicates suspended coverage after discovering inconsistent dates in century-old property records. The Foundation's digital archive locked itself when an automated integrity check detected unauthorized changes. At 3 in the morning, a retaining wall beneath Pier 9 shifted 6 inches toward the river. Clara had submitted a repair warning about it 4 months earlier. Carbone's office had marked the issue resolved. Alessio stood alone in Clara's conservation's laboratory shortly before dawn. The fire had blackened the ceiling and destroyed most of the equipment, but the damage was strangely selective. Solvents, reports, and imaging stations had burned. The antique cabinet containing less relevant survey fragments remained intact. Someone had known exactly what to destroy. Carbone entered without knocking. The search teams found blood at Warehouse 14, enough to indicate a serious injury. Who's Clara's type? Alessio looked at him. You had her medical records tested already. We needed confirmation. No, you needed a conclusion. Carbone paused. She confessed before 12 families. She also said she did it for money. $20 million is money. Alessio remembered Clara sitting across from him 18 months earlier when he had offered her a private contract worth 4 times her foundation salary. She had read every page, closed the folder, and returned it. If my judgment belongs to the person paying the most, she had told him, then my work becomes worthless. 6 months later, she had mortgaged her apartment to save Emily's school arts program rather than ask him for assistance. Clara cared about money when it protected someone else, never when it merely enriched her. That was the first contradiction. Personal Carbone stepped around the burned examination table. You are letting attachment interfere with evidence. Alessio's gaze settled on the singed floor beneath the microscope. A pale rectangle showed where a surge-protected battery unit had stood. Conservation equipment stored imaging data at regular intervals, even during outages. Where is the backup battery? Destroyed. There is no melted casing, then she took it. Why steal a battery and leave with the map? Carbone's patience thinned. Because the evidence was stored on it, Alessio crouched beside the microscope. Clara had taught him that fire did not erase objects cleanly. It left outlines, residues, and distortions. A heavy battery removed before the blaze should have left parallel impressions in the dust. Instead, the dust beneath the table was undisturbed. The battery had never been there. He opened the maintenance panel on the wall. Its inspection card showed that Carbone Security had removed the unit 2 days earlier for routine replacement. The backup had been disabled before Clara entered the laboratory. That was the second contradiction. Technical. Alessio rose slowly. You said the MAP-S solvent was found in Clara's private workroom. It was. The report identified the solvent as methylpyrrolidone. Carbone's eyes remained steady. Correct. Clara stopped using it last year. It damages historic linen. It was still in her inventory. Locked in a disposal cabinet. She had access. So did your hazardous materials team. Silence stretched between them. Carbone adjusted his cufflink, a habitual movement Alessio had seen thousands of times and never questioned. I raised you after your father died, Carbone said. Do not make me your enemy because you regret trusting a woman who betrayed you. The words should have sounded wounded instead. Alessio heard precision. Carbone knew exactly which emotion to apply and where. Alessio crossed to the surviving oak cabinet. Did the harbor team recover Emily Bennett? No. Then, how do you know she was at Warehouse 14? Carbone answered too quickly. Her blood was found there as well. Alessio had never mentioned Emily's name to him. The photograph on Clara's phone had not been shown publicly. No official search order had identified her because Clara had never admitted she was being threatened. Yet, Carbone knew which Bennett woman the second blood sample belonged to. That was the third contradiction. Adversarial. Alessio concealed his realization. How long until the neutral trust assumes the districts? 66 hours. Move the transfer forward. Carbone stared at him. Why? If Clara has allies among the Bellandis, they will act before ownership changes. Set the final transfer for tomorrow night, during the Foundation-S public centennial auction. That gives us less than 40 hours. It gives her less than 40 hours. Carbone considered the proposal, then nodded. I will prepare the amended documents. After he left, Alessio waited 3 full minutes before opening the old cabinet. Clara had once explained that restorers left silent signals for one another, tiny arrangements that appeared accidental to anyone unfamiliar with their habits. Every surviving survey roll faced outward except one. That roll had been turned inward, its linen tie knotted twice. Clara always used 2 knots when a document contained information too dangerous to catalogue. Inside the roll, Alessio found no written message. Only a transparent fragment of tracing film, marked with 3 silver lines. He warmed it between his palms. A route appeared, beginning at Warehouse 14 and extending beneath the harbor to an abandoned quarantine hospital on North Brother Island. Beside it, Clara had pressed a single fingerprint in plum-colored conservation wax. There was blood embedded in the print, fresh enough to have been left after her escape. She had survived the warehouse. Alessio called the only person whose loyalty Carbone believed had already been eliminated. Sophia, he said when she answered, her breathing weak but steady. I found Clara's route. A long pause followed. Then Sophia gave him the truth he had been too blind to earn. Clara left that route for me, she said, not for you. Sophia refused to give Alessio the island's exact landing point until he came alone. He left his phone, watch, signet ring, and pistol inside a locked office safe. Then he changed into a dock worker's raincoat and crossed the East River in a maintenance boat Sophia had borrowed from an old harbor contact. She waited near the ruined quarantine hospital with a bandage wrapped around her head and one arm immobilized against her chest. You look terrible, Alessio said. I was shot by men wearing your family crest. The accusation landed without ornament. Sophia had escaped the drainage tunnel with Clara's evidence, only to find 2 Carbone security officers waiting outside. The first bullet grazed her temple. The second fractured her left shoulder. She fell into the storm channel, where the current carried her beneath a maintenance platform. Carbone's men had poured stored blood around the outlet and photographed an unconscious substitute wearing Sophia's jacket. By the time Alessio's physician arrived, both the false body and the archival disc had been removed. "How did Clara get the tracing film to the laboratory?" Alessio asked. She left it at warehouse 14 after rescuing Emily. I carried it back while Carbone's people were searching the northern docks. And the fingerprint? Clara cut her hand on a container lock. Most of the blood they found came from that, not a gunshot. Relief struck Alessio so sharply that he had to look away. Sophia noticed. "You don't get to feel relieved yet." "No," he said. "I'd taunt." They crossed the overgrown grounds toward the hospital. Rain had softened to a grey mist, but the abandoned brick buildings remained slick and treacherous. Sophia led him through a collapsed laundry wing and down a service stairwell. A pistol hammer clicked behind him. Alessio stopped. "Turn around slowly," Clara said. She stood beneath a rusted archway in a borrowed black coat wrapped over her torn evening gown. Her dark curls were damp and tangled. A bandage covered her right palm, and another was secured around her left thigh, where a bullet had grazed her during the rescue. At Warehouse 14, she held the pistol with both hands, though the strain showed in her shoulders. Even exhausted, wounded, and publicly condemned, she filled the ruined corridor with the same sensual confidence she had carried into the ballroom. Alessio had never seen her look more beautiful. He had also never seen her look at him with so little trust. "Where is Emily?" he asked. "Safe. I need to see that." "You need nothing from me," Sophia stepped between them. He came without weapons or a tracker. He also came with an army that answers to a man who abducted my sister. I dismissed Carbone's security command when 2 hours ago, and how many of his officers obeyed? Alessio had no answer. Clara lowered the pistol only a fraction. "That is what I thought." A door opened behind her. Emily Bennett emerged in an oversized hospital coat, pale but upright. Bruises marked her wrists, but she appeared otherwise unharmed. She touched Clara's shoulder. "You said he might come," I said. "Sophia might bring him." Emily looked directly at Alessio. "My sister walked into a warehouse controlled by armed men because your godfather threatened me. Then she carried me through a drainage tunnel while bleeding because she refused to leave me behind." Clara's jaw tightened. "Emily, he should know. He should have known me before he needed evidence." Alessio accepted the blow without defending himself. "I was wrong." Clara's laugh held no warmth. "That is a private sentence. You destroyed me publicly. I know. You know the accusation was false. You do not yet understand what you did with it." Before Alessio could answer, Sophia moved to a broken window and raised 2 fingers. A boat engine sounded beyond the reeds, not the maintenance boat they had used. Another engine answered from the southern shore. "They followed us," Sophia said. Clara immediately set aside her anger. "How?" Alessio reviewed every step of his departure. No phone, no watch, no signet, different clothing, an unregistered boat. Then he remembered the document from the oak cabinet, the tracing film. Clara's expression sharpened. Metallic pigment can carry a passive frequency tag. Carbone expected me to find it, or expected you to lead him to me. Sophia moved toward the rear corridor. "There is a drainage exit beneath the morgue." "It collapsed years ago," Clara said. "We checked. How many entrances remain?" 2, the laundry wing and the eastern ward. Alessio listened to the approaching boats. "Then we do not run blindly. We make them believe we did." Clara studied him. "You are still accustomed to giving orders. Then tell me what to do." That stopped her. For 3 years, Alessio had trusted Clara's expertise only when it supported decisions he had already made. Now he stood unarmed in a building she understood better than he did, with Carbone's men closing around them. Control would get them killed. Clara removed the damaged map from beneath her coat and spread it across an old examination table. This hospital was built on reclaimed land. The foundation plans won't match the current shoreline, but the silver layer, might she warmed the linen with both palms, lines emerged. Faint but visible. One ran beneath the eastern ward and ended at a circular chamber below the waterline. An isolation cistern, Clara said, large enough to shelter 4 people. It has an intake tunnel connected to the river. Emily looked at the dark stains on the ceiling. Can it still be opened? The release mechanism was designed to prevent contamination from spreading outward. It would have been operated from the map room. Alessio examined the boundary symbols. These marks appear on the Moretti Harbour districts too, because they were never ordinary property boundaries. Clara traced the silver line leading from Warehouse 14 to the hospital. They form a sealed transport network built during the 1892 cholera outbreak. Later, the Moretti family used those tunnels to move people and cargo unseen. Lucia Valenti documented every entrance. Why was her name hidden? Because she owned the original waterfront parcels before your family did. Alessio stared at her. Carbone said she died before I was born. The certificate is false. Clara removed a folded photograph from inside the map. It showed a young woman standing on a pier beside Alessio's father. Her dark eyes, strong mouth, and severe cheekbones mirrored Alessio's own. On the back, someone had written, Lucia Moretti Valenti and infant son, 1988. Alessio was 36. The date matched his birth year. My mother was Isabella Moretti. Isabella raised you, Clara said carefully, but Lucia appears to have given birth to you. Alessio felt the floor shift beneath the life he understood. Why would Carbone conceal that? Because the original Valenti covenant transfers the waterfront districts to Lucia's surviving heir if Moretti ownership is ever challenged. That heir is you. Then Carbone's plan gives me more territory. No. The covenant requires a verified maternal claim. Your midnight signature affirmed Isabella Moretti as your legal mother. When the districts enter the neutral trust tomorrow, the trustees can argue that no qualified Valenti heir exists. Who controls the trust? Carbone drafted it. The answer settled between them. Carbone was not simply stealing 3 districts. He was severing Alessio's legal claim before transferring the entire hidden harbor network into an entity he controlled. A metallic impact echoed through the laundry wing. The mercenaries had entered the building. Clara touched 3 silver symbols on the map in sequence. Somewhere below them, ancient gears began to turn. You knew how to open the cistern, Alessio said. I suspected you tested the sequence while we were talking. Yes, despite the danger, respect cut through his shock. Clara had investigated the map, protected Emily, evaluated the building, and prepared an exit while he was still absorbing the first truth about his mother. She had never needed him to save her. She needed him to stop standing in her way. The floor trembled as a circular iron hatch opened beneath the examination table. River air rose from the darkness. Sophia helped Emily descend first. Clara gestured toward the ladder. You next. Alessio shook his head. You are injured and you are unarmed. A door crashed open at the far end of the corridor. Alessio positioned himself between Clara and the approaching footsteps. Then we go together. For one suspended second, she searched his face. You follow my instructions once we are below, she said. Every one of them. Yes. Clara lowered herself onto the ladder. Alessio descended beside her, supporting only the weight she permitted him to take. Above them, Sophia fired twice and followed. The iron hatch began closing. Just before the opening disappeared, a small device rolled across the floor and dropped into the cistern. A red light blinked on its metal casing. Clara recognized it first. Down, the explosion struck before they reached the water. The device was designed to stun, not destroy. Its blast filled the cistern with white light and compressed sound. Alessio lost his grip on the ladder and struck the water shoulder first. For several seconds he knew only cold, darkness, and the high metallic ringing inside his skull. Then a hand caught the back of his raincoat. Clara. She pulled his face above the surface while Sophia guided Emily toward a stone ledge beneath the sealed hatch. The effort tore open the wound in Clara's palm, but she did not release Alessio until his feet found the submerged floor. Can you hear me? She asked. Barely. Can you stand? Yes. Then hold the map above the water. She pressed the rolled linen into his hands and moved to help Emily. No gratitude, no comforting touch. Only an instruction based on what each person could still do. Alessio obeyed. Footsteps crossed the floor overhead. Carbone's men attempted to force open the iron hatch, but the old quarantine lock had sealed from below. It would delay them, not stop them. Clara located the river intake by touch. A corroded wheel controlled the inner gate, but decades of mineral deposits had fused it in place. Sophia tried with her uninjured arm and nearly collapsed. "Stop," Clara said. "You'll displace the fracture." Alessio took her position. "Which direction counterclockwise, slowly, if the upper teeth break?" "The gate stays closed permanently." He followed Clara's rhythm instead of applying all his strength. The wheel resisted through half a turn, shuddered, then moved. Black river water rushed through the opening. They entered the intake tunnel one at a time, supporting Sophia between them. Clara's injured thigh prevented her from swimming against the current. So Alessio moved behind her and let her control his forearm across her upper body. He did not pull her without warning or pretend she weighed nothing. He matched his strength to her directions, until the current carried them beyond the hospital foundation. A maintenance skiff waited among the reeds. Sophia's harbor contact had left it there as a fallback. They reached a decommissioned municipal pumping station before Carbone's teams searched the eastern shoreline. Emily cleaned and rebandaged Clara's palm, while Alessio set Sophia's fractured arm with supplies stored aboard the skiff. None of them required emergency surgery, but Sophia needed a hospital within hours, and Clara could no longer put full weight on her left leg. They had 31 hours before the centennial auction. Clara spread the map across a rusted steel table. "We have enough to prove that the official account is false," she said. Not enough to convict Carbone. She arranged the evidence in separate groups. First came the suspicion. Her original report existed before the gala, even if the preserved copy had been destroyed. The automated Foundation archive had locked itself because a document hash no longer matched its earlier integrity record. The hash could establish that someone replaced her report, but it could not reveal who. Second came access. Carbone Security had removed the laboratory's backup battery, monitored the secret passage, controlled the emergency doors, and possessed Clara's personnel file. Sophia's testimony connected his officers to the staged attack at the drainage outlet. But he can claim his staff acted without authorization, Alessio said, or that the maintenance decisions were routine. Clara agreed. "We still need evidence of objective and knowing participation." Emily set down a cup of water. "What about the photograph of Lucia? It proves she knew Alessio's father." Clara said, "It does not prove maternity or Carbone's fraud. Alessio studied the damaged beneficiary layer. What would prove it? The original Valenti covenant, Lucia's verified biological record, and evidence that Carbone knowingly routed the districts into a trust he controls. Where is the covenant?" Clara touched a cluster of silver marks beneath Warehouse 14. The map indicates a document chamber below the original shoreline. Carbone searched the warehouse before the gala, but could not locate its entrance. "He needed me to reveal the silver network. He framed you to force the layer into public view, and used the ownership dispute to create the neutral trust," Clara said. "But there is a problem. The chamber's opening sequence appears incomplete." Alessio placed his palm over the marks. Nothing happened. Clara positioned his hand beside hers. The silver symbols brightened. Both bloodlines were required. Valenti and Moretti, their joined warmth completed an emblem neither could reveal alone. For a moment, their hands remained pressed against the map. Alessio felt the steady competence in Clara's fingers and remembered how casually he had once mistaken access to her work for intimacy with her. She withdrew first. "Carbone needs both of us alive until the chamber opens," she said. "After that we become liabilities. Then we make him come to the auction believing we already recovered the covenant." Sophia looked up. "If he thinks you have it, he will destroy the trust documents and disappear." "Not if he believes the covenant names someone else," Clara replied. She took a fragment of tracing paper and sketched a false extension to the beneficiary line. "We tell him Lucia assigned the network to Emily's charitable foundation. That gives him a reason to complete the transfer publicly. Once the neutral trust takes possession, he can challenge Emily's claim and seize everything under the emergency management clause." Emily frowned. "You want him to think I own the harbor, only long enough for him to reveal how he plans to take it." Alessio understood. Carbone monitors my private legal channel. I can send an encrypted instruction to amend the auction announcement. He will believe I am hiding the change from him, and he will prepare a response using information only the person controlling the trust could know, Clara said. The controlled information would establish intent, but they still needed the original covenant. Warehouse 14 remained under Carbone's security. Alessio proposed sending loyal men. Clara rejected it. Carbone would identify the breach and cancel the auction. We enter through the 1892 intake tunnel, she said. It is outside modern surveillance. You can barely walk. I can interpret the map. You cannot. I can carry you. Her eyes cooled. Alessio corrected himself. If you choose to let me, the distinction mattered. Clara studied the route, then nodded once. Only where the tunnel floor is unstable. Otherwise, I use a support brace. Sofia gave Alessio the names of 6 guards still loyal to him. He assigned 2 to take Emily and Sofia to a private clinic operated beyond Carbone's network. The remaining 4 would secure the pumping station and prepare extraction from the harbor. They did not depend on phones. Clara wrote every instruction on acid-free paper, marked each sheet with a different pigment, and sealed them inside numbered envelopes. If communications failed, the guards would follow fixed times and locations. If one envelope showed the wrong color under heat, they would know it had been replaced. Before leaving, Alessio sent the false legal amendment. At tomorrow's auction, acknowledge Emily Bennett Foundation as the newly discovered Valenti beneficiary. Keep Carbone uninformed until the announcement. The reply came from his attorney 3 minutes later. Understood. 7 minutes after that, one of Sofia's harbor contacts reported unusual movement at the auction hall. Carbone had ordered the Foundation's entire board detained. The trap had worked. He had acted on information Alessio had shared through only one compromised channel. Clara folded the silver map and rose with difficulty. Alessio offered his arm without touching her. She accepted it for balance, not forgiveness. Together, they entered the flooded tunnel beneath Warehouse 14. After 200 yards, the passage opened into a circular stone chamber. At its center stood an iron cabinet bearing 2 empty handprints. Alessio and Clara placed their palms into the impressions. The cabinet unlocked. Inside lay Lucia Valentius' original covenant, a sealed medical file, and a handwritten ledger recording 26 years of payments. Every payment led to Carbone. The final page, dated 3 days earlier, contained an order to transfer the complete harbor network after Alessio's death. Below it was a second instruction. If Clara Bennett authenticates the Valenti claim, eliminate her at the centennial auction. Clara stared at her own name. Then the chamber door closed behind them, and Carbone's voice emerged from the darkness. Thank you for opening what your families hid from me. Carbone emerged from the tunnel with 6 armed men behind him. He wore a charcoal overcoat over his formal suit, as though entering a flooded 19th century chamber were merely another appointment. Water darkened the polished leather of his shoes, but his silver cufflinks remained immaculate. Alessio moved in front of Clara. Carbone's men raised their weapons. You came unarmed, Carbone said. A remarkable concession from a man who once believed control could replace judgment. You taught me that belief. I taught you to survive. You taught me to mistake obedience for loyalty. Carbone's gaze shifted to the open cabinet. The covenant, medical file, and payment ledger remained inside. Step away from the documents. Alessio did not move. Clara touched his wrist from behind. Not affection, a signal. Fighting 6 armed men inside a chamber with 1 exit would destroy both the evidence and them. They stepped aside. Carbone put on a pair of archival gloves before handling the covenant. The detail was almost insulting. He had burned Clara's laboratory, corrupted her work, and ordered her death, yet he protected the document he intended to steal. He examined the seal, then gave the ledger to one of his men. Search them. A guard found Clara's phone, the damaged map, and the pigment-marked instruction cards concealed inside Alessio's coat. Carbone studied the cards beneath a portable lamp. You prepared timed contingencies, he said. Very sensible. He held the papers over the chamber's oil flame. Clara watched them curl and blacken. The instructions were gone. But the guards assigned to receive them still knew that a missed delivery meant the operation had been compromised. The fallback survived because it depended on absence, not transmission. Carbone did not know that. "What happens now?" Alessio asked. "The Centennial auction proceeds tomorrow evening. You already control the trust documents. Why keep us alive?" Carbone closed the iron cabinet. "The covenant requires dual authentication. Your blood establishes the Valenti succession. Miss Bennett's certification establishes that the document is genuine, and after she authenticates it." Carbone gave Clara a measured look that depends on whether she remains useful. He did not confess to ordering her death. He did not need to. The ledger had already revealed the instruction, and he knew they had read it. Carbone's men bound Alessio's hands and fastened a tracking cuff around Clara's uninjured wrist. They escorted them through a restored freight tunnel that opened beneath Warehouse 14. A secure van waited inside. Clara was placed in the rear compartment alone. For the next 20 hours, Carbone kept them separated. Clara was taken to a private conservation suite constructed beneath the Moretti auction hall. Her thigh wound was cleaned and closed by a physician who spoke only when medically necessary. The doctor confirmed that the bullet had damaged muscle but missed the major artery and bone. Clara could stand briefly with a brace, but walking without support risked reopening the wound. Carbone supplied her with a black silk gown cut to accommodate the brace and flatter her abundant curves. The gesture was calculated. He wanted 500 guests to see an elegant professional making a voluntary authentication, not a wounded prisoner. On the work table lay Lucia Valenti's covenant. Beside it rested a prepared certificate bearing Clara's name. The certificate declared the covenant genuine, but legally superseded by Alessio's midnight acknowledgement of Isabella Moretti as his sole maternal parent. Once Clara signed, the neutral trust would acquire the waterfront districts and every tunnel beneath them. Carbone entered at 6 in the evening. The auction begins in 1 hour. Clara continued examining the covenant beneath magnification. "You changed the final page," she said. "I preserved it. You replaced the original linen hinge with modern Japanese tissue. The hinge was damaged. You are not a conservator." "No, but I employed one who understood that cooperation protects families." He placed a tablet in front of her. Emily appeared on a live security feed beside Sofia in a private clinic. Both were guarded by men wearing plain clothes. The room number and clock were visible. Carbone had found them. "If I sign, you release them. If you refuse, their physician receives different instructions." Clara studied the video. Sofia's fractured arm remained immobilized. Emily sat beside her, apparently unharmed. Neither looked toward the camera. Too deliberate, they knew they were being watched. "Where is Alessio?" Preparing to correct his mistake publicly. An hour later, the Moretti auction hall glittered beneath gold chandeliers. 500 guests filled the tiered seats. Representatives from 12 crime families occupied the front rows, while corporate attorneys, federal observers, and international buyers faced the central stage. The restored territorial map hung inside a climate-controlled glass display. Carbone entered to applause as trustee of the disputed waterfront districts. Then Alessio walked onto the stage. He wore a black tuxedo and his Moretti signet, but 2 of Carbone's men remained within several feet of him. To the audience, they appeared to be personal guards. Clara watched from behind a one-way panel in the conservation suite. Alessio approached the microphone. "Last night," he said, "I allowed personal attachment to delay my judgment concerning Clara Bennett." Her chest tightened. Carbone stood at the side of the stage, studying him. "I believed her work deserved further examination." Alessio continued. "I was wrong," the audience murmured. Carbone's posture relaxed slightly. Alessio looked directly toward the one-way panel. He could not see Clara, but he knew where she stood. Miss Bennett altered the Moretti map, concealed a competing beneficiary, accepted payment from a hostile entity, and attacked a member of my security detail. Every accusation struck with the same public force as before. Clara understood the strategy. Carbone expected Alessio to distrust her. Any visible alliance would cause him to change the transfer procedure or remove her from the auction entirely. Understanding did not lessen the pain. Alessio had not warned her he would repeat the humiliation. He had finally followed her plan in the tunnels, Yet he still chose alone what she would be required to endure. Carbone entered the conservation suite. "You see," he said, "he always chooses the Empire." Clara kept her expression still. "I am offering you something he never did. Certainty. Sign the certificate." And Emily survives. On stage, Alessio announced that the neutral trust would assume immediate control after Clara authenticated the covenant. Carbone's attorneys placed the transfer documents on a silver table. Clara picked up the certification pen. "Bring me to the stage." Carbone considered her request. "Why?" "Because you need the federal observers to witness my authentication. A signature made in a hidden room by a threatened woman is vulnerable to challenge." He smiled faintly. "Still protecting professional standards. They are all I have left." Carbone ordered 2 guards to place Clara in a wheelchair. She refused. "I will walk." The brace locked around her thigh. She crossed the stage slowly with a polished cane, her full figure upright beneath the lights. The audience reacted with surprise. Then silence. Alessio watched her approach. Guilt showed in his eyes, but he did not move to help her. Good. Carbone still believed them divided. Clara reached the document table and examined the covenant before the federal observers. She confirmed the linen age, ink composition, Valenti seal, and concealed Moretti countermark. Each finding was projected onto the screen behind her. "The document is authentic," she said. Carbone's attorneys presented the transfer certificate. Alessio picked up the signing pen. This was the irreversible moment. Once he signed and Clara certified, Carbone's trust would receive legal control of the harbor network. Clara looked toward the glass display containing the map. During her examination in the suite, she had discovered that Carbone's replacement hinge was not merely a repair. It concealed a narrow strip cut from the Covenant's final page. He had moved the missing clause into the map because he could not destroy original Valenti linen without compromising fiber authentication. Carbone followed her gaze. He realized what she had found. "Sign," he said quietly. Alessio placed the pen against the transfer document. Clara pressed her warm palm to the covenant. Silver lettering surfaced beneath Carbone's replacement hinge and spread across the linen. At the same instant, the territorial map inside its glass case began revealing a second hidden name. Not Lucia Valenti. Vittorio Carbone. The audience rose in confusion. Carbone drew a pistol and pointed it at Clara beneath the document table. Alessio signed the transfer. The pen left Alessio's hand. Carbone's pistol remained hidden beneath the table, its barrel pressed against Clara's side. "Complete the certification," he whispered. Clara looked at Alessio's signature. He had transferred 3 waterfront districts, the tunnel network, and every associated Moretti asset into the neutral trust Carbone controlled. It appeared to be surrender. Then the federal observer beside the table received an automated disclosure on her tablet. Her expression changed. The transfer involved federally regulated port facilities. Completing it had triggered mandatory identification of every trust beneficiary, administrator, creditor, and controlling party. One name appeared across the screen: Vittorio Carbone, sole emergency administrator. The disclosure contained the amendment Carbone's attorneys had prepared after intercepting Alessio's false message about Emily's foundation. Carbone had acted on information supposedly shared through only Alessio's private legal channel. The amendment had been drafted 7 minutes after that message was sent, then concealed from the Moretti board. The controlled information trap had become part of the federal transaction record. Alessio had signed away half his empire to force it into evidence. Carbone understood too late. He pressed the pistol harder against Clara. "Say the map is fraudulent." Clara turned toward the 500 witnesses. "The name appearing on the map is not an ownership claim." Carbone's gaze sharpened. "It is a restoration trap," she asked the federal observers to magnify the newly revealed letters. Under ultraviolet light, Vittorio Carbone glowed bright green, while Lucia Valenti's original markings remained silver blue. The name was applied with modern acrylic adhesive, Clara explained. The same material used to lift and replace the Covenant's final hinge. Whoever altered one document altered the other. Carbone raised his voice. By her own admission, Miss Bennett had exclusive access to both. It was a credible defense. The audience remembered Clara's confession, the Belandi payment, and the recording in which she had told Sofia to conceal evidence from Alessio. Carbone turned toward the federal observers. She planted my name, manufactured a report, and manipulated Alessio into transferring control to her sister S Foundation. The foundation was never a beneficiary, Clara said. The amended trust agreement appeared on the main screen. Emily's foundation was mentioned only inside Carbone. Emergency response provisions, the provisions written after Alessio sent the false message. Clara faced the audience. I confessed because my sister had been abducted. I claimed I acted for money because Alessio knew I would never accept it. I named Lucia at random because he knew I never selected evidence without cause. Every false answer contained a contradiction he could verify. Carbone smiled coldly. A convenient explanation created after your fraud was discovered. That is why my explanation is not the proof. She placed Lucia's covenant beneath the document camera. The replacement hinge lifted easily under controlled moisture. Beneath it, silver words emerged from the original linen. No trustee named in a concealed amendment may inherit, administer, or transfer Valenti property. The clause automatically disqualified Carbone. He had hidden it because his own trust structure violated the covenant. Carbone's pistol shifted beneath the table. Clara tightened her hand around the polished cane. The payment ledger recovered with the covenant records, 26 years of transfers to shell companies, she continued. Those companies funded Carbone's security, purchased Warehouse 14, and paid the men who abducted Emily Bennett. The ledger is a forgery. Then you should not know what its final page says. Silence fell. Clara had not publicly revealed the instruction ordering Alessio's death or her own elimination. Only 4 people had seen the page inside the underground chamber. Clara, Alessio, Carbone, and the guard who carried it away. She looked directly at Carbone. What did you believe I was scheduled to authenticate at tonight's auction? He did not answer. Alessio did. A maternal claim connecting me to Lucia Valenti. Clara shook her head. That was what Carbone expected us to find. But the medical file does not contain Lucia's maternity record. For the first time, Carbone's confidence faltered. It contains his. The screen displayed a hospital admission from 1988. Vittorio Carbone, then a young Moretti attorney, had been treated after a warehouse explosion. Embedded in his shoulder were fragments of black sealing wax and silver shell pigment, the exact materials used to conceal the beneficiary layer. A signed nursing statement documented that he had been carrying Lucia Valenti's covenant when admitted. Lucia had not entrusted the document to Alessio's father. She had entrusted it to Carbone. He was her attorney, Clara said. He knew the covenant, the tunnels, and every condition required to activate the claim. He spent 26 years hiding the network until he could place himself in control of it. Carbone's rebuttal came quickly. A hospital record proves possession, not fraud. Correct. Clara displayed the Foundation Archive's integrity ledger. Although Carbone had replaced her final report, the system preserved the hash of every submitted file. That hash matched the original report recovered from the laboratory's isolated workstation before the fire. Sofia appeared on the auction hall's secure video feed from the clinic. Emily stood beside her. Carbone's guards were on the floor behind them, disarmed by 2 of Alessio's loyal harbor officers who had followed the pigment-coded fallback instructions after the scheduled envelopes failed to arrive. Sofia held up the intact offline camera from the laboratory. Its photographs showed Carbone's security officers outside the secret passage, the removed backup battery order bearing his authorization, and the blood staging equipment at the drainage outlet. 2 independent evidence chains now converged. The original covenant and medical record established his access. The trust amendment and federal disclosure established his objective. The archive hash, Sofia's photographs, and shell company ledger established his deliberate acts. Carbone abandoned denial. He pulled the pistol into view and seized Clara by the arm. The audience recoiled. Alessio took 1 step forward. "Stop," Carbone ordered, "or she dies before your guards reach this table." Clara did not wait to be rescued. She drove the metal tip of her cane down across Carbone's wrist. The pistol fired into the silver table, throwing sparks. She turned with the movement instead of resisting his grip, used his balance against him, and struck his injured shoulder, the one damaged in 1988. His hand opened. Clara caught the pistol before it hit the floor and slid it across the stage toward Alessio. Carbone reached for the emergency control inside his cuff link. He pressed it. Steel panels descended over every exit. Hidden charges detonated beneath Warehouse 14, and the auction hall shuddered as the harbor tunnel supports began collapsing. His final contingency was not escape. It was destruction of the property, documents, and witnesses. But Clara had already identified the cufflink frequency in the hospital passage before the auction. Alessio's loyal engineers had disconnected the modern ventilation system and reopened the original Valenti floodgates. The blast pressure traveled away from the hall through the empty quarantine tunnels. Water flooded the demolition chambers before the remaining charges could ignite. Carbone stared at the intact covenant. He had misjudged the woman he considered merely a restorer. Clara had understood the entire harbor as a single historical document and preserved it accordingly. Alessio's guards restrained Carbone. The federal observers secured the covenant. Ledger, trust records, and weapon under separate chains of custody. Then Alessio returned to the microphone before the same families and officials who had witnessed Clara's disgrace. He removed his signet ring. Clara Bennett did not betray the Moretti empire, he said. She protected it while I gave my trust to the man destroying it. He placed the ring on the table before her. The accusation against her is withdrawn. Her confession was coerced. Every order issued against her is revoked. Clara looked at the ring but did not take it. Revoking your order does not restore what you took from me. Alessio met her eyes. I know, for the first time he said it publicly. And for the first time he did not ask her to forgive him. Vittorio Carbone did not disappear into a private Moretti prison. Alessio surrendered him to the federal observers already present at the auction, along with the covenant, payment ledger, trust records, Sophia's photographs, and the weapon Carbone had fired. Because the conspiracy involved regulated ports, fraudulent corporate transfers, kidnapping, and attempted destruction of federal evidence. No family agreement could quietly protect him. Within 48 hours, Carbone's shell companies were frozen. 23 members of his security organization were arrested or removed from Moretti employment. 4 corporate attorneys surrendered their licenses in exchange for cooperation. The neutral trust was dissolved after a court determined that its controlling administrator had concealed a direct financial interest. The 3 waterfront districts returned to Valenti ownership, not Moretti ownership. Alessio could have challenged the ruling through his biological claim to Lucia Valenti. Instead, he renounced sole control and placed the districts under an independent harbor foundation with Clara, Emily, Sophia, maritime workers, and community representatives on its governing board. The hidden tunnels were permanently closed to illegal transport. 2 became protected historical sites. The quarantine route was restored as an emergency flood channel, exactly as Clara had recommended. Alessio lost nearly a third of his private revenue. He considered that loss part of the cost of correcting what he had allowed. Clara spent 6 weeks recovering from the wound in her thigh. She required physical therapy and walked with a cane for another month. Emily returned to her classroom, but no longer dismissed security as something that happened only to other families. Sophia underwent surgery on her shoulder and later accepted command of Alessio's reorganized protective division with the contractual authority to refuse any order violating civilian safety. Clara did not return to the Moretti archive. She founded the Bennett Institute for Document Conservation in a converted waterfront customs house. Its first major commission was the complete preservation of Lucia Valenti's map collection. Alessio funded none of it. He offered resources once. Clara declined once he respected the answer. 3 months after the auction, the 12 families, federal officials, foundation board, and surviving Moretti council members gathered again in the same ballroom where Clara had been accused. This time, her restored map occupied the central display. Clara entered wearing an emerald gown tailored to celebrate every soft, generous curve of her 440-pound figure. Her dark curls fell over one shoulder, and plum lipstick framed the calm expression of a woman who had reclaimed her name without requiring anyone's permission. Alessio waited alone on the stage. He did not summon her forward. He went to her. Before the same audience that had witnessed her humiliation, he spoke without a prepared statement. I accused Clara Bennett because I trusted authority more than evidence and bloodline more than character. She gave me contradictions I should have examined. I chose public judgment instead. My decision endangered her, her sister, and every person in this harbor. He did not mention Carbone's deception as an excuse. He did not describe his own pain. I stripped her of my protection as though her safety and dignity were privileges I had granted. They were never mine to give or remove. Clara saved herself, uncovered the conspiracy, preserved the evidence, and designed the strategy that protected this city. I failed her publicly. Therefore, I apologize publicly. He placed the Moretti protection ring beside the map, not in Clara's hand. The ring no longer represents protection. If she ever chooses to accept it, it will represent my promise that no decision affecting her will be made without her equal authority. If she refuses it, her position, safety, and ownership remain unchanged. The ballroom remained silent. Clara looked at the ring, then at Alessio. I do not forgive you because you finally understand what you did. I know I will not enter your world as an employee, dependent, or protected woman. I would not ask you to, and I will never love a man who needs me to become smaller so he can feel powerful. Alessio's gaze moved over her with the same restrained admiration he had once hidden across the conservation table. I have never wanted you smaller. No, Clara said. You wanted my truth smaller. That was worse. He accepted that too. Clara did not take the ring that night. She left the ballroom with Emily and Sophia, while Alessio remained behind to answer every question from the board. For 6 more months, he repaired what could be repaired without asking for a reward. He testified in Carbone's trial, opened the Moretti archives to independent review, compensated workers harmed by the fraudulent trust, and followed Clara's preservation decisions, even when they limited his control. He visited the Bennett Institute only by appointment. He never arrived after midnight, expecting her time. On the first anniversary of the auction, Clara invited him to examine the completed Valenti map. Morning sunlight filled the conservation room. The map rested between them on a wide glass table, its silver boundaries invisible beneath the restored surface. Alessio stopped several feet away. May I? Clara held out her hand. He approached and placed his palm beside hers, not over it, not ahead of it. Warmth traveled into the linen. The silver network appeared beneath their fingertips, revealing the harbor in complete and equal halves. Clara took the Moretti ring from her pocket and set it between their hands. I am not accepting protection, she said. What are you accepting? A beginning on my terms. Alessio smiled, slight and unguarded. Then tell me the terms. Clara drew him closer and whispered them herself.